Hello. This webinar is on add-in scripting in ZTPFGI. And here's what we're going to cover in the webinar today. Why have add-ins? You know, why would TSI add this feature to the product? What are they? What are add-ins? What can be done with add-ins? And then we'll go over how do you create an add-in. Once you've got add-ins created, how do you manage them? Where can you get help and documentation on add-ins? Then we'll talk about the scripting languages being used, give a little information about the scripting language, and we'll talk about the development environment because ZTPFGI actually has a development environment enclosed within it just for add-ins, which is pretty cool, and we'll look at that and how to use that development environment. And then we'll go over some examples of add-ins finally. Most of the presentation will be spent on the examples, I believe. So first, why add-ins? And before we go to why add-ins, just peeking at the second slide, what are add-ins? Add-ins are script programs composed of one or more script files, which are also called modules, but they're just script files, and they're associated with one or more buttons on the add-ins tab. That's basically what add-ins are. So coming back here, we'll say, why add-ins? Well, there's two primary reasons. So the first is efficiency. So suppose that you have a set of actions that you do often, and you're going to do it often enough so that it would actually pay off for you to write a script to do those things automatically for you. You know, it might take, say it takes 10 clicks to do what you want to do. If you could, you know, do those 10 clicks by clicking one button, that would be worth it. Another primary reason is integration with other tools. The add-ins API would allow you to call out to Windows and have the other tool do something for you, or it would allow maybe an interface for the tool to appear within the application. For example, if the tool had a web page, or you might it might be a utility that's runs on Linux that you can call, and you can do that from add-ins. So we talked about automation of repetitive tasks, and then a creation of tools. We just talked about that. Integration of external tools. We've sort of talked about that. Let me go back to this item, creation of tools. Once you have a script that does something you like, if you could keep reusing it, maybe you could put a dialogue on the front to gather some information before the script starts, then you're sort of creating a tool for yourself. That's what we mean by that. And finally, distribution of tools by the company to developers. Add-ins actually has a system so that the company can publish add-ins and push them to developers with automatic updating. So for example, if a developer creates a tool that is very useful, not just to that developer, but would be to other developers, then maybe the company would push that tool to all developers, and it would appear automatically on the add-in tab. Or some admin might develop the tool independently and push it to people. And that could be anything from just a web page that they want a button for on the add-ins tab, or something else. So or like integrating another utility or something with the ZTPFGI product. So we touched on what are add-ins, that they're script programs. They can be coded, debugged, and executed in ZTPFGI. There's also an API for JavaScript running in web browsers to talk to ZTPFGI, and we consider that part of the add-ins, but there's just not time to cover that today. So we're concentrating on the script programs that run in ZTPFGI. So what can be automated with add-ins? Well, you can download and upload files. you can open files in the editor. You can open editors. You can find out which editors are open. You can close editors. You can even, if the editor is editing text, like code or something, you can actually insert text into the editor at a certain point, or you could even delete text in the editor if you wanted to with the add-in. You can show web pages either embedded in ZTPFGI or in an external browser. You can connect and disconnect to debugging systems, and you can find out information about which system you're connected to. You can find out whether you're connected to a vPARS or something. You can set trace options and find out which trace options are set. You can create ECBs and set breakpoints and control the debugger. You can tell the debugger to run or step or things like that. You can execution counting. I don't know if you're familiar with that feature, but it's a code coverage-like feature that tells you how many times certain lines have been executed, and you can automate that with scripting, add-in scripting. You can add and remove programs from source view. You could even add expressions to the watch view. You can show dialog boxes in order, to show messages or gather information. You can run Windows programs and utilities. So let's say that you have a terminal emulator that you like to run, and when you run ZTPFGI, you also like to run this terminal emulator in Windows. You could have a button in ZTPFGI to launch that terminal emulator right from ZTPFGI. Or let's say that you have a command line utility on Windows that you like to run to analyze a file and produce some information. Well, you could run that from an add-in, even get the information back into the add-in and display it maybe in a dialog box. So that's how you start to move into the area of building tools with add-ins. Linux scripts. So if Z-Linux has a server running on it, and not just Z-Linux, but any flavor of Linux, but that has one of our servers running on it, we can send it messages. You can run commands on Linux, get the information back. You could even write a script yourself on Linux and put it up there, and then run it from ZTPFGI and get the output back and process the output in the add-in. The output view is the view at the bottom that shows errors and stuff. You can write information down there with add-ins. You can get information about what platform and target you're using. You can automate projects to a pretty good degree. You can find out which projects are open. You can close projects. You can even create a new project, although that takes a little bit of doing. But you can create a project with an add-in, things like that. You can talk to terminals like ALC and LOC, and even the command terminal. You can send messages through that, and you can get the output back, and then you can process the output. We'll see an example of that today. ZTREX. ZTREX is the performance analyzer, and you can turn on performance analyzing, and then you could run a program, and then you can automate the ZTREX buttons and what they normally do in ZTPFGI. And then three final things, which are perhaps more minor, but it gives you a convenient interface to deal with JSON or zip and unzip files, or read and write INI files. So creating an add-in. So let's finally go over to the application and start to look at it and see how to create an add-in. Oops, no, don't go to thank you. Just a second, sorry, I lost my place. Okay, and we're going all through here. And okay, here we go. So here is ZTPFGI. And so you go to create an add-in, you go to the add-ins tab, and then you say new button. That's because right now add-ins are always associated with buttons. In the future, they might not be associated with buttons on the add-in tab. They might be associated with right-click menus. But right now, they're just associated with buttons. So we click new button and we get this, excuse me, we get this dialog box. Now, to create a button, all you really have to do is type the caption and then click OK, and you're set to go. Even though there's a lot of fields on here, most of them will fill in automatically. Your name will be here. This will be all filled in. So if I just type, let's say I want to do my hello world, that's what I want the button to say. You can see everything else filled in for you, and then you can just click OK, and you're ready to go with your button. And I think that's what I'll do right now. And if we get a chance, I'll come back and talk about the other fields here. So, so there we go. I'll click that, and now two things have happened. Our little mini development environment has opened up here, and if we look in here now, I've got a lot of scripts because obviously I'm a developer for scripts and so forth. But here's the My Hello World button that's appeared down here. So if I want to, I can click this button and it will run. Now we can see, looking at the script, it's just written some little code for us just as to get us started. Print hello world. Now it always says hello world. That's just a coincidence that I called it My Hello World. Every script that you start with a button will say hello world. So now when it says print, that actually goes down to the output view. So when we click this button, what we'll see is it will go down there and it will print that. And there it is down here, hello world. Now we could have also shown it popped up a message in a dialog box. To do that, we would type message box, hello world, oops, and then we'll run that. And you don't always have to go to the button, and I'm going to show you that you don't always have to. But let's go to the button one more time, and we'll click the button, and there it is popping up in a message box. Now the button is not very conveniently located right now. You can organize this area. So if you go down to the bottom of this area and click organize, you get the gallery organizer. This is just a preview over here. You can't really click over here and do anything. Right down here, and let's say I wanted to move it up to one of these other sections. I could go up and move it up, or I could drag it up there and drop it somewhere up there. See, I could put it into this section here if I want to. But let's say that I want to make this button very prominent. I want to click it a lot. I can also put it right up on the add-in tab itself. So to do that, I say favorite, make it a favorite, and it will go up here, and it's going to appear right up in a prime location. I can have 5 buttons up here in the prime location. So let's make this one of them, and we'll say OK. And now you see now that button is up here. It's one of our prime buttons, and it's very easy to click. So so we talked about that's how you create the add-in. Now let's say, and I'm going to show how to edit this. Let me see what stage we're supposed to be at. We're creating an add-in. So we've showed how to create an add-in. So now let's see what our next stage is here, managing add-ins. Okay. So before we get to editing the add-in and what else the add-in can do, let's just touch on how to manage it. Because let's say I close this, and now if I close it, that's fine. I can run it anytime. I don't have to have that little development environment open. If you did, that would sort of defeat the convenience purpose, wouldn't it? But let's say I do want to change this script. I want to edit it, or I think it's got a bug in it or something. I don't want to debug it. How do I get back to it later? What you do is you go to the add-in manager, which is the first button over here. Now there's a filter up here to help you find the button that you, or the, actually the add-in that you created. So, and I know we typed in, we had My Hello World, right? So here it is right here. And then I right-click that and I say Edit Debug, and I've got it back. You can have more than one little mini development environment open at a time if you'd like. I could also open, say, this one. And so now I've got two that are open. And you can only debug one at a time, but you can have two open. You can look at the code. You can copy and paste the code and so forth. If you don't want an add-in anymore, you can go to the add-in. Well, if you didn't want, I'm going to keep this one around, but let's say I wanted to delete a different one, like that other one we were just looking at. You can right-click that and say Remove Add-in. And then it asks you what you want to do with it. I'll say move to the recycle bin, and it's gone. So you can also manage the add-ins that way. There's one other thing you can do from this. Let me close this, because there's one other thing you can do with this. You can go to Properties of the add-in, and here you can do things like you can give a description of the add-in. If you don't want to say Ed, I could say Ed Jordan or something like that. And this add-in says Hello World. So, and there are a few other things you can do on here, which you could actually have multiple buttons in one add-in, and they would all appear here. And then you can edit that. And here's where I would change my button caption. So if I don't want it to say My Hello World, but I just wanted the caption to be Hello World, I could change it here. And then say OK, and see it's changed up here to Hello World. So that's a little bit about managing add-ins. Now, where can I get help and documentation on add-ins? And we'll show that next. Let me open that add-in back up. And let me also open the add-in we're going to use for the webinar, the main add-in. Okay. So help and documentation. If you click this help button here, or this add-in help button here, it will take you to your web browser, and we have a website to provide help on CTPFGI add-ins. So this has a lot of information. You can see it's addinhelp.ctpfgi.com. The basics of add-ins, the basic language, which is a scripting language. Then it has some, how do you access special windows? We're going to keep adding to this, but how do you access special Windows folders? How do you execute Linux commands? How do you run a Windows program? How do you upload a file? We're going to keep, those are like special tutorials we're going to keep adding to. Then there's a complete reference about all the objects that you can access through the add-ins. And, and then for each object, let's see, let's get down to a good one. Well, there's the print method. Then it will tell you about that, and usually there is an example at the bottom. That's what I would like to show. Connect to a system. So this is done with a certain object, and here's the example of how to do it. If app.connect system, so that's how you say app.connect to system, and you say the ID of the system to connect to. So that's the add-in help. We'll go back to the basics. I think we'll come back here and talk about the basic scripting language in a moment. The flavor of basic use, yes, all right. So the scripting language, there are actually two scripting languages, BASIC and Pascal. we're recommending that people use BASIC unless they have some special reason to use the other. So the flavor of BASIC is like VB.NET, which is by Microsoft. It's not quite identical. So we would recommend that if you want to know what you can do in the scripting language, look at all the examples. I mean, look at the examples in this documentation. And also this page is very useful. It tells you how to, for example, how to do statements in BASIC, how to do comments, how to declare variables in constants and strings, how to create arrays. And so there's a lot of good examples here. It's pretty long. How to create subroutines and functions and control structures like if then else and for next and so forth. So we've gathered all the important information into one place here, and with a lot of examples about how you do these things. And so I think this is very useful help there. Just some tips about the BASIC language. The statements don't end with semicolons. That can be odd. You wrap statements to the next line with an underscore. You can concatenate strings using ampersand. Variables have to be declared, and here's how you declare them, and so forth. And this is written in that help document also. And we'll get a little more a sense of how to write the script as we go on in these examples. Now, so for example, right now for the add-ins development environment, I want to talk about how to use this mini development environment that we have here in the add-ins. So we've got this little script, hello world, and if you let's say that, just to make it a little more interesting, let's say we want to open a web page instead of just saying hello world. So one of the nice things about the development environment is it will pop up tooltips and auto-completion lists to help you complete the commands that you're trying to complete. So if I want to pop up a web page, most objects that you need to talk to are owned by the app object. So this is just something you learn. First you type app, and then you type a dot. Then it will show you the objects and functions and so forth that you can call with the app object. Now I want to pop up I want to open an embedded web page inside of ZTPFGI, so in the editors area. So of course you have to learn which object to use. I know that since I'm going to open it in the editors area, I would type editors. There it's popping up to help me. So I type editors. Now what can I do with the editors? I pop that up and I put a dot and it pops up for me. And then I'd say, okay, open URL. Open URL. So then I type the open parentheses and I see first I need the caption for the tab, and then I need the URL, and then I need a tooltip to go over the tab. So the caption for the tab is as important with this release of ZTPFGI, because we actually, with this release, when the web page tells us that a page, what the title is, we put that on the tab. So that's an enhancement we've made in ZTPFGI this time. It used to be more important for you to say what the tab was, but let me say it's a TSI site, and the URL then would be the URL for TPF software, and then the tab tooltip, I'll just say TSI site again. And we don't worry about the browser type. When it says equals, that means it has a default value, and the default value is probably what you want, so I'll just leave that off. And now I'm going to save it, and we won't use this hello world. We won't use this hello world anymore. We'll just get rid of this. Now, when you want to run it, it does go through a compile process to make sure everything's all right with the script. if you just run it, it will compile it and it will run it. If you want to compile it first to see if everything's okay, you can also click the compile button. And it says loaded, so that means everything's okay. So now I will run, and it's popping up the web page with the TSI site. The first time the site pops up, it's a little slower than the next time. Okay, so now actually we've got a button that will pop up this web page. And that can be useful if you have a web page you need to go to a lot. So if I click that button, it goes to that site. Now, what this shows is you don't have to reach the button in order to test your script. This button here does the same thing as that button. So in case that button is out of view, maybe it's buried in this list of other buttons, you can click this to keep to launch the test. Let me say that each script program actually could be serving more than one button, but we won't go into that complication right now. Okay, so that's how you do that part. Let's talk about stepping through the program, declaring variables, and just go into this a little bit, and then we'll move on quickly to other examples. I'm just going to make up a variable that, so you do need to declare the variables. And let's say that I want to put the URL in a variable, and maybe I would let the user tell me what that is. So I could do that in the future if I wanted to. So let's say we want to put this in a variable. We're going to call the variable URL, and just define it up there. I'm going to compile to see if that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Now let's just show stepping through just to show this part of the development environment. So now I will click this button, and we've stopped here. There is a variables view. It's not. It's mostly good for looking at variables that you've declared. It will show you their values, and it will allow you to change them if pretty much if they're local, if they're variables that you've declared in your script. If they're objects sometimes that are provided by ZTPFGI, you can't see into the object very much. But if you've got variables that are strings, integers, and so forth, you can see those pretty well. You could look at local variables, global variables, and so forth. This is fine. So as we step, we see that the value of the variable changed over here. And let's say that we just in our testing, we didn't want to go here, but we wanted to go to Microsoft instead. And then, okay, so now we've changed the value of that variable. Hopefully I spelled that right. And now if we step and I think it's opening the web page. Let's see. Oh yeah, there it is. It already opened it. Okay, I missed that. So there's the web page. So we changed the value of the variable, and it changed there. So this, and there's also a call stack, which is of some use. So that's the development environment mainly in a nutshell. There's some other things you can do, like add additional scripts that you can call from this script. So if I add an additional script, it's still all part of the script program. It all gets compiled together. But let's say I've added this, and then once you add, you can save it. So I'll just accept that name of module 1 for now. And then if I want to call this example here, I would need to go over here and say imports module 1. So now this module can see whatever is inside of this module, and we could call this, I think, example, and then a message. So we could say, and it'll help. See, it's letting us auto-complete that example, and the message is hello world. And then we'll just comment out. You can comment out a line like this if you like. And then we'll just run this, and we'll see, here's hello world, example hello world. So this module called this module to help to do some code. Okay, so that's the basics of the development environment there. We'll quickly move on to some more concrete examples. So here's where we move to our other special add-in with examples for this time. Let me show you how this, for this webinar, let me show you how this add-in is basically structured. I've got an array of sort of menu items basically, and I'm popping those up using an API in the add-ins called base dialogues. I can say select from a list. So I've created this list in an array, and then I'm going to pop up that list with certain things in the titles and certain captions and things like that. And this is all, you know, documented in here. If you want to like learn how to use the base dialogues object, you can come down here and this, you know, and the one we happen to be using is select from list. So you can do select from list, and it'll show you there's two alternative overloaded ways to call it, what the parameters are here, and here's two examples of how to call select from list. And so so that's you know, that's one way you can learn to do it. So, and then once the item comes back, then we call one of these other functions, which are either located here or located here, and the and this imports statement says that I can see this and I can see this, base examples and examples too. So that's basically how that's working. So and then the first one we're going to call is connect to a system. Just as an example, and I know, and here's the entire code that you need to connect to a system. App connect to system, and then the ID of the system. And the ID is what you see when you pop up your available systems dialog box, and it comes up, and you look at the systems. Then I need the system ID. So that's what I've put here, the system ID, and then it will connect to a system. So to see that work, I'll click the webinar examples, and this type of dialog box is available to you in your add-ins. And I'll say OK for connect to systems, and now it's connected to a system. So you can combine that action with other actions to create a script. You know, you can make sure that you're always connected to a system before you act. And I think there's an example of that down here. Okay. Here's an example. If not, app has active system. So if you're not connected to a system, then connect to a system. So you can do that so that you're not trying to connect to a system twice. You know that you're already connected. So that's a little statement you can put into your add-ins scripts. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to show an example of actually downloading a file and then opening it in WordPad. This is showing interactivity with Windows programs. So to download a file, the statement is, well, first you have to register the file so that we know the host, the user ID, the path, and the file name. So you get that, and then you just say download that file. And so that really takes two statements to do that. And then once the file is downloaded, if it is successfully downloaded, then this is the code to display it in WordPad. There is an example like this of popping up Notepad in the add-in help that's online. So let's see. And the file that I'm actually downloading is in my host files under my under here somewhere. The file is actually in here, and it's going to be downloaded. Now it's going to happen fast because I've already downloaded it before. It's in my local cache. But let's run that example. And let's see. There's the add-ins tab. Now I could run it. You see right now this button is not highlighted. That's because I'm not on the main module that serves. It's not enabled. I was not on the main module that serves that button. Now that I'm here, it will highlight that. So if you're here and you're confused because that button's disabled, just go over to the the script that has the execute for that button, and it will work. So I'm going to click here. I could have clicked up here on Webinar Examples, and we'll say download a file and open in WordPad. And there it is, and that was the total contents of the file. So then the next example we're going to do is listing projects. So I said you can do things with projects, list the projects, open the projects, even create a project. This is a very simple example of just listing the projects. And when this is app.print, that goes down to the output view. And you can actually write, there's a API to write to any of these tabs that you want to write to. This is going to go to the command. By default, it goes to the command tab. So we will just run that, and it will list, if you look at the projects, you see I have these projects. So it will list those projects down here. And we'll run the button, and we'll say list the projects, and there they are, right there. Next, we're going to show sending input through a terminal and then getting the output back and doing something with the output. Now, to send output into a terminal, we're actually going to do the command terminal in this example. So that's app.system.command terminal. And if I had wanted to type that, I would start with app, and then I would do system, and then I would do command terminal, you know, and so I wouldn't have to type very much to get there. To send the message in, you send, and then you see we're doing something very simple. We're sending in ZDSys, and then we're sending in ZDPath CVAA, and then we're sending back one after another. So this the add-ins will wait until the output comes back, and then we can do something with the output. So get last output returns the output, and we can do, you could write it to a file. And in fact, I'll post an example of writing it to a file in case you want to do that. But what we're going to do instead, we're just going to pop it up in a message box just for this example. And so it's going to pop up 3 messages as these inputs go in. And let's see, we'll run from the button up there. That's time. We'll double click. So there's the first output that came back for ZDSys. There's the second that came back. Now we could be writing these to a file if we wanted to, or we could be looking at the string and saying, oh, I see that there's an error in this, and so I'm going to take a certain action in my script because there's an error in this output. You know, you might be operating at that level. And so then setting trace options is another useful thing. Here you see we're just going to set the macros that are being traced, actually the macros and the groups. So I'm going to press Shift-Control Spacebar, and that shows me, when I'm inside the parentheses, that shows Shift-Control Spacebar will show you the parameters that you need for this command. And so this is the macros that I want to trace, and I also want to trace all the macros in this group. And then I want to trace these programs, and then I want to set macro run on to true. So we'll run that, the trace options test, and it certainly didn't look like it did much, but let's see. You know, I think I think the ALC probably has to be brought up or the active trace terminal has to be brought up one time before this works, and that is actually possible in the trace options. But let's run it again, and we will we'll see it work. So go back to the add-ins tab, click the button, set trace options, and now if we go to System, ALC, and trace, we'll see that, and we look at this, we'll see that yes, we got the programs, we're tracing the programs we asked for, we're tracing the macro group and the special macros we asked for, and we'll also see that run is on for the trace. Let's actually clear all this. Don't actually want those trace items to be on right now. And say OK and turn run off. OK. All right, so moving to the last example, which we'll try to cover quickly. The last example, it has to do with execution counting. So if let me give you an example of how execution counting is usually turned on to show you the steps. So usually you've got the program over here in the load sets view and you want to do execution counting for. And so maybe you've got a few clicks here to trace these in source view. And then now if I want to turn on execution counting for these, since these are multi-selected, I could come over here and say execution counting, turn on execution counting for all trace members. So that's a couple more clicks. I mean, it's not terrible, but it is a couple more clicks. Then now we want to actually somehow kick off the testing for this, and I've got a transaction, sort of a little toy fake transaction that will do that here. And so we need to stop in source view. Now once we're stopped in source view, now we need to click the run button so that we can gather the execution counting information. So then we'll go to the debug tab and click the run button. And that runs through everything. And now if I look around, it was a short program, obviously, but here I'm seeing that each of these lines was executed one time, and these were executed 24, and these were executed 1 and 5, and so forth. And once I have that information, I could run this again. I could make a change to the program. I could run this again and see how these lines changed. Once I have that information, so I've run it twice. Then I can create an execution. I can create a report about the execution counting. So I can say, let's see, manage, export data. I need to export the data, yes, because I haven't saved it yet. And now I can create a report. I can export a report about this. So let's see. I can multi-select and I can export. And then I can say whether I want it to be a PDF or an Excel file, and then it will pop up the PDF. So you can see the steps that are involved in doing the execution counting. So what if you could automate that, or any part of that? You could save a lot of time. So that's what our script is going to do. If we look down here, let me close this for a second. Execution. I've actually put it into two parts because there's quite a few parts, but the first part here is making sure we're connected to a system, and then tracing the members from the load set, then enabling execution counting. That's what the first part does. The second part, and then it calls the second part, so both parts are executed together. And then it clears the breakpoints to make sure there are any breakpoints to stop the execution counting from running. It sends in the ZPRG command through the active trace terminal, which is ALC1, and then it tells the debugger, then source view will stop. It tells the debugger to run, and then it saves the counts, and then it clears the counts and it runs it again. And that's you would probably have to make a manual change at that point to change the code, and then it exports the data and creates the report. So it does all that stuff that we did all those clicks for with this script. Hopefully the script will run. We'll cross our fingers here. Sometimes the ZPRG7 is not causing it to stop in source view, and I'm not sure why, but let's see. So we will run the script, and just like this, even though this says part 1, it will also run part 2. So here we go. So here it's adding those things to source view trace. You can see it's turned on the execution counting. Now it's stopping in source view, and then it ran. And now it's just popped up a message box. It wouldn't have to do this, but we did this because we wanted to. We popped up this message. And and it's doing all those steps again, and now it's popped up the report in the I don't have Excel on this machine, but this is the Excel viewer. So it's popped up the execution counting report, and this is how those reports usually look. So it did those steps, and so it shows that you can put things together and do something that can be useful for you. So what I'd like to do now is take questions. Are there any questions?
Have any questions? Please click on the hand raise button so that you will be unmuted to proceed with the questions. Or you can enter your questions in the chat box. If there's a question from Prince, and the question is, can we see any example to use existing shell scripting into add-in?
Existing shell scripting. By shell scripting, do we mean in Windows, in the Windows shell?
Since I have unmuted you, you can go ahead with the question.
Okay, so I'm here using Linux shell scripts. I have some Linux shell scripts that we were using on rootkit, and just want to see if we can change the scripts on ZTPFT, or we need to write them again.
Yes, you should be able to call those. How well they integrate with what ZTPFTI doing is another question. Let me see what I have here in the help site. So what you do is you would know the name of the Linux system that you're connecting to, and you would get an object for that, and then you would you would say, so you get a server object for that, and then you would say server.exec, and you could call your script. This says ls, so this is just a this is a shell command. So so instead you would put the name of your script, and then output would come back, and the output would be server last output. There were some more advanced, but the last output then has a list of the lines that came back, and so you could process the output that came back. So this would be an example, and right there. So that's, and if you have any problems implementing that, let support know, and we'll try to get you an answer as quickly as we can on using that. Is that answer okay for now?
He said he's fine with the answer.
Okay, good.
Is there any other question? If so, please click on the hand raise button so that you will be unmuted to proceed with the questions, or you can enter your question in the chat box. It looks like we have covered all of the questions, Ed. Thank you, Ed. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. A short survey will open up. You can specify topics for the upcoming webinar session. We will send you webinar follow-up email within a week's time, which will contain the link of this recorded session. If in case of any queries, contact customer support executive or write to productsinfo@ttfsoftware.com. Thanks again for joining us today, and we have webinars followed on second Thursday of every month. We'll see you next time. Thank you.